From the studios of Blackwater Media in the city of Atlanta, it is time for another episode of the Dr. William Lester Show, and I'm very glad to be with you for this edition of the program. As you know, we have been very much involved with discussing cool vintage horror films, fantasy films, in celebration of the Halloween season. And we've discussed a number of films. We're certainly going to continue that tonight. And I hope that the listeners have been kind of following along with the information. I really hope that some of you have chosen to adopt the Cool Vintage Horror Movie Halloween Film Festival as one of your new traditions. As I said previously, it's been something that I've been doing now for about a decade, and it never loses its steam. It's always fun. I always look forward to it. It's always exciting, and it's just a marvelous way to usher in the Halloween season. On this episode, we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorites. One that I never get tired of watching, one that I look forward to each year. And it is brought to you by Universal Studios. And Universal became a staple of the horror genre, going all the way back to the 20s with Lon Chaney Sr. But in this film, we're talking primarily about the work of his son, Lon Chaney Jr., in the classic film The Wolfman. And so let's run down some of the details about this film, about the production of this film. This was a film that was released in December of 1941, directed and produced by George Wagner, written by Kurt Siodmak, very famous screenplay. Of course, as I said, Universal Studios. Here's what's interesting. That film was produced on a budget of $180,000. And it was a lot of money in 1941. Now, in today's money, that's equivalent to around $3 million. So it kind of gives you some context about how the budgets of these type of films have kind of skyrocketed beyond imagination. $180,000 budget, $3 million equivalent today. Fantastic cast. I want to run down with you. Of course, Lon Chaney Jr. is the Wolfman / the alter ego Lawrence Talbot. The great Claude Rains plays his father, Sir John Talbot. Warren William plays Dr. Lloyd. The legendary Ralph Bellamy plays Paul Mumford. He is, in one part of the film, he's referred to as a captain. In another part of the film, he's referred to as a colonel. So I know that his character is the local constable, and I don't know whether or not the colonel refers to a previous military status. Patrick Knowles plays Frank Andrews, and Patrick Knowles is a figure that pops up in a number of the Universal horror films. Of course, the legendary Bela Lugosi is in the film, and he plays Bela the Gypsy, a character that is central to the storyline. Maria Ospinskaya plays the gypsy Maleva, who is also the mother of the Bela Lugosi character. Evelyn Ankers plays Gwen Conliffe, and she's really what you would call the love interest, if you will. Her father, Charles Conliffe, and proprietor of the antique store in the story, is played by J.M. Kerrigan. Faye Helm plays Jenny Williams, who is a friend of the Evelyn Ankers character Gwen. And Forrester Harvey plays the The character, I was trying to think of how I can describe him. He's just a little nervous character. He seems to assist the doctor, he assists the police, but his character's name is Twiddle. And he injects a little bit of humor and fun into the proceedings. So basically, this story seems to be set in one of these nondescript European countries. Maybe it's England, but I don't think it's ever said in the film. And I think this is something that Universal picked up on during their run of great horror classics. You kind of have these somewhat generic European style settings, very, very lush settings that you see in the film. A lot of atmosphere here. A lot of dark forests, a lot of subdued lighting, a lot of fog. And these are the things that, even by 1941, these are the things that have already become a signature motif of Universal horror. And this film is filled with all of the kind of identifying earmarks of Universal horror. But basically, Lawrence Talbot is returning back home after 18 years. Apparently, his brother has been killed in a hunting accident, and so there's a thing running through the film where you have the son returning home, and there has apparently been some kind of strained relationship between father and son, between Lawrence and Sir John. And so there are sequences in the film where you see this kind of father-son conflict, and they both want it to be fixed. And so, look for that in the film. Of course, these other characters, Dr. Lloyd, Paul Mumford, and Frank Andrews. Frank Andrews, played by Patrick Knowles, is basically the gamekeeper on the Talbot estate. And of course, Paul Mumford is like the local constable, and of course, Dr. Lloyd is the doctor of the town, and they form a circle of friends for John Talbot, and of course, in welcoming back Lawrence Talbot. Now, in the film, Sir John has turned the attic into an observatory, and Larry Talbot, with some technical skills, goes up to the observatory, and he does a little bit of work on the telescope. I think he installs some glass, and I guess he kind of recalibrates everything. And he, in testing the refractor, he spies Gwen Conliffe across town working in the antique shop, and he's smitten with her. She's a lovely girl. And of course, he's going to make it his business to meet her. And so there's a fantastic scene with him in the antique store, and they're kind of going back and forth. And he's trying to make a date with her, and she's kind of playing hard to get, and so on. But in the midst of all that, he purchases an antique cane that has a silver wolf's head as the handle, and inside the wolf head there's also the pentagram, the 5-pointed star. And so you have this immediate appearance of this symbolism, of this occult symbolism. And he, at that moment, is not aware of any of the metaphysical connotations of that symbol. And of course, she explains it to him, and he laughs this off. I mean, of course, this is the kind of superstitious nonsense that I would expect to find here in this provincial little town. And of course, he buys the cane, and he's on his way. Now, what ends up happening, and I want to be careful here because, I don't want to, do too much spoiling, and I want you guys to enjoy the film. But he ends up with Gwen and her friend Jenny Williams, who's played by Faye Helm, and they're just kind of out walking in the evening, And they come upon a gypsy camp. Apparently, the gypsies come through this town every autumn. They're singers and dancers, musicians, fortune tellers, and what have you. And they, of course, it's very entertaining. Hey, let's get our fortunes read. And Jenny goes in and she gets her palm read. She gets her palm read by the Bela Lugosi character, the gypsy Bela. And there's a whole thing there with some signs and some symbolism, and kind of a harbinger of things to come. I won't give it all away, but I will say that before that night is over, Jenny Williams is ripped apart by a werewolf. And in an attempt to rescue her, Lawrence is, of course, bitten. And as we all know, if you're bitten by a werewolf and you live, you are now cursed to be a werewolf. And so we're off and running. Now, of course, this thing is going on in the town where, okay, you have the sudden reappearance of Larry Talbot. You have the horrible death of Jenny Williams in the forest. You have the gypsies here. And the gypsies always are the target of local angst and suspicion because they're the outsiders, right? And so clearly there's a problem, because Larry says, "Hey, I killed a wolf. I beat this wolf to death with my cane, and it was attacking Jenny, and so I went after it, and it bit me in the process. But there's no injury. There's no wound. It heals overnight. Because the next morning, it's not there. The only thing that's there where there should have been injuries is the pentagram. And so everybody's trying to answer these seemingly unanswerable questions. What was it that attacked Jenny Williams out on the moors? What was it that Larry was fighting with and bitten by? His clothes were ripped to shreds. Was this just a madman? Is Larry imagining this wolf creature, or what's going on? So eventually he has a kind of confrontation, and by confrontation I don't mean necessarily negative or hostile. But he has this confrontation with Mileva, the gypsy woman, and she tells him exactly what happened. What happened to Jenny Williams, what happened to him, and what happened to the wolf that he killed. And of course, he can't believe it. It's just too fantastic. These things can't be real, right? But of course they are. And it is. And it's happening. And Larry Talbot is now cursed. On the next full moon, he's going to turn into a werewolf. And he's going to lurk the forests. And he's going to wreak havoc, murder, and mayhem. And we see this played out. And the whole while, Larry is trying to come to grips with what's happening. Is this me? Am I turning into this creature? And why is this happening? How could this be true? How can somebody explain this to me? And so you see that whole thing played out. His love interest, Gwen Conliffe, the Evelyn Ankers character, is kind of in the middle of things. She's kind of torn because, she's lost her best friend, was mutilated in the forest. Larry tried to rescue her. He's been bitten. He's starting to believe, Mileva the gypsy, that he's actually under some curse. He's starting to believe that this monster that people are talking about is him. And of course, she's dissuading him. Oh, you can't believe that. These just old gypsies. They make up stories. But it's settling in his mind that yes, in fact, it is him. And the initial transformation sequence in the film is fantastic. And it shows him just in this moment of stress and anxiety and, bordering on madness. And so look for that scene, the initial transformation into the werewolf. Now, there's also this ongoing thing between Larry and his father, Sir John. Sir John, too, he's very skeptical, of course, of these gypsy stories. And he thinks that Larry's just, under a lot of pressure. He's back in town, back in the country after 18 years. And the girl is murdered. He's attacked. He's traumatized. Nobody knows what's happened. He just chalks all this up to, you've been under a lot of pressure, son. But of course, as the observer, we know better. We know better. We know that his fears are well-founded. We know what he is. We know what's coming. So, moving towards the end of the film, when he finally comes to grips with what he is and he accepts it, and he knows the people, the people like Frank Andrews and the doctor and everybody, Paul Munford, they're out in the forest hunting, but they don't know that what they're actually hunting for is him. They think they're looking for some mad, crazed wolf or something that's been, plaguing the town. But he knows they're looking for him. They're hunting for him. And he's been confined to a chair inside Talbot Castle. And his father basically restrains him in order to prove, right? I'm going to tie you up. You're going to sit here. You're going to stay here. And when you find out, when you don't turn into a monster, that should prove to you that this is all nonsense. But of course, it's not nonsense. And, well, before we get to the and, let me tell you what I'm enjoying tonight on the show. I am having a little Christian Brothers Brandy, which is, brandy is one of those, it's just perfect as we get into the cooler months. It's kind of difficult in the summer, I have to admit, but as we get into the autumn and deeper into the year, it's a wonderful, warm, full-bodied drink that's perfect for sipping. And so I have a wonderful little goblet of some Christian Brothers. It's a very good brandy, a very old school brand, and of course it's priced right. I think the bottle I picked up was like $9. And it's just a wonderful drink and an outstanding value. Now, I've paired that tonight with something a little bit unorthodox. I've paired that with a Blender's Gold Churchill cigar. And let me tell you about Blender's Gold, because Blender's Gold embodies what I've been saying on the show. It is a private label hand-rolled cigar. It's a premium-made cigar, but it's a private label cigar that's sold by Walgreens. That's right. You won't find it in your cigar store, your local tobacconist. It's a private label cigar sold exclusively through Walgreens. And it's a very good little cigar. Now, of course, it's not the same as the cigar that you pay $12 for, but that's ridiculous anyway. But it is a hand-rolled, premium-made cigar with Dominican and Honduran tobaccos. It's an outstanding, value-priced cigar. And I purchased, there was a package of 4, and it was right around $10 or $11. So it's, for the price, to be able to get 4 premium-made Dominican cigars it's an absolute must-do. And they are wonderful smokes. And so I'm certainly pairing that tonight with this Christian Brothers Brandy. And quite frankly, it's a marvelous combination. It's a marvelous combination. The Blender's Gold have a very thick, almost a spicy kind of definition to them. It's almost, and I'm trying to think of something that it almost reminds me of something close to a clove in terms of the aroma signature. And it's very easy on the palate, but it has a wonderful, deep, earthy aroma. And so that's why it's just absolutely exquisite with the brandy. So make sure that you are pairing your cigars and your pipes with some wonderful autumn themed drinks like a brandy or even a nice rum. We haven't talked rum yet on the show, but we will definitely get to it. So getting back to the film, and I'm not going to give away the ending. I know some of you who are kind of neophytes, maybe you haven't seen it. It's an iconic film, but there is a climactic ending in the forest with all of the aforementioned players, in which, of course, Gwen Conliffe is in great danger, walking through the woods alone, looking for Larry. The gypsy woman, Mileva, is there issuing all of her tidings of terror and horror. And it is, I will only say that it is a tragic ending. It is a very sad and tragic ending. However, I can say that Lon Chaney Jr. portrayed Lawrence Talbot / the Wolfman 3 or 4 more times in sequels. So this personal tragedy, this curse that has befallen Larry Talbot is a legacy, is a storyline that will continue to be played out over a series of films, this being the first one. And we'll probably get a chance to cover at least 1 or 2 of those sequels going into Halloween. But The Wolfman, 1941. An absolutely iconic. Now, when you're looking at the slideshow during this program, you'll see a lot of photographs, a lot of great photographs from the film. And as you look at the Wolfman makeup, it is certainly iconic. It's iconic in film history in general and in horror film history in particular. An absolutely iconic look that other filmmakers have tried desperately over the decades to duplicate or surpass. And it's just, there's nothing like that look that was achieved by master makeup artist Jack Pierce. And I mean, he struck pay dirt on this design. But this is the type of thing that you get from Universal Horror. Almost all of their mainline monsters have an iconic status. Whether it's Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman or Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster, Lon Chaney Sr. as Phantom of the Opera, certainly Bela Lugosi as Dracula, Boris Karloff again as the Mummy. The way the monsters were designed have become iconic, and almost everything else in the genre after them, to some degree, in some way, was trying to emulate, or was certainly inspired by those Universal monster iconic looks. So, yes, 1941. The film was produced and directed by George Wagner, written by Kurt Siodmak. Again, $180,000 budget, or roughly $3 million in today's money. Lon Chaney Jr., legendary actor, a much better actor than he was ever given credit for. And this movie and the subsequent reprisals of that role made him an icon to horror fans for the last 7 decades. Claude Rains as Sir John, Warren William as Dr. Lloyd, Ralph Bellamy as Colonel Paul Mumford, Patrick Knowles as Frank Andrews, Bela Lugosi as Bela the Gypsy, Maria Aspinskaya as Mileva the Gypsy Woman, Evelyn Ankers as Gwen Conliffe, J.M. Kerrigan as Charles Conliffe, her father and owner-proprietor of the Conliffe Antique Emporium, Faye Helm as the doomed Jenny Williams, and Forrester Harvey as the always hesitant, always scared out of his mind of shadows on the wall, Twiddle. So there you have it, the Wolfman. Now, this, of course, in terms of where you're going to see it, well, DVD, Blu-ray, I have to believe that your cable and your satellite systems are running it at least this month. It may be on there all the time. Certainly, you may find it streaming somewhere. I don't know if Netflix is running it now or Hulu, but even if they're not, it's a DVD that's readily available, and definitely needs to be part of your permanent collection. I mean, if this isn't in your collection, you're not being serious. You're just not being serious. Some people, and I mean some people in the film industry, still consider The Wolfman as the greatest werewolf film of all time. And of course, it's totally subjective, but I find it difficult to argue with that assertion. And it's certainly one of my all-time favorites. So I'm going to continue enjoying my Blender's Gold Churchill cigar and continue sipping my Christian Brothers Brandy. And I want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the show. Remember, you can listen to the show on the Blackwater Media YouTube channel. You can listen to the show on the Dr. William Lester Show Facebook page. You can also listen to the show on Google+. You can hear the show on my personal Facebook page, which just carries my name. And so there's plenty of platforms for you to hear the show. I appreciate the comments I've been getting on the Blackwater YouTube channel. Thank you very much. I love the support. Please keep listening. We have more films to look at. We're still relatively early in October, so we'll be able to look at several more. And it's going to be a great October. It's going to be a great Halloween season, and this is just a fantastic way to observe and celebrate it. So remember, no matter what you do in all of your walks of life, remember to listen to the Dr. William Lester Show. Why? Because it's always cool and it's always vintage. And I'll see you next time.